5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation.
This is a tried and true method for securing further state control, i.e. socialism, or state control over private property, the means of production, and the avenues of trade. But they're going a little bit further to get the actual foundations of the avenues of trade, which are predicated upon resources.
6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives.
This is the whole COVID mass track and trace, lockdown, quarantine, and shutting down the economy, killing the middle class through socialist essential business propaganda that the entire business class simply obeyed, straight out of the Milgram experiment.
The results, as I observe them in the laboratory, are disturbing. They raise the possibility that human nature cannot be counted on to insulate men from brutality and inhumane treatment at the direction of malevolent authority. A substantial proportion of people do what they are told to do, irrespective of the content of the act and without limitations of conscience, so long as they perceive that the command comes from a legitimate authority. If in this study an anonymous experimenter could successfully command adults to subdue a 50-year-old man and force on him painful electric shocks against his protests, one can only wonder what government, with its vastly greater authority and prestige, can command of its subjects.
This is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government.
This reminds me of what happens right after 9/11, where the money just goes flying out.
What happens after 9/11 is this tremendous ramping up.
The money just came out of Congress, goes flying out.
And control, government control, is increased immensely, but entirely in secret.
All in secret. The public didn't know, the media didn't know, and it would take us years to find out.
7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states.
They're using Cyrus the virus to do that now.
You are clear to release.
His name is Cyrus Grissom, a.k.a. Cyrus the Virus.
Cyrus the virus doesn't care about city, county, state, or national lines. He doesn't care about race, color, religion, or socioeconomic status. Cyrus the virus is the great unifier, bringing humanity together as one.
8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education.
It was U Tant, the third Secretary General of the United Nations, says, "The world will not change and find peace if there is not new education." Guidebook is quoted by John Stormer, and None Dare Call It Treason, Liberty Bell Press, 1964, page 112. The study of history raises problems of value which are better postponed until the pupil is freed from the nationalistic prejudices which at present surround the teaching of history. Even further, as we have pointed out, it is frequently the family that infects the child with extreme nationalism. The school should therefore use the means described earlier to combat family attitudes. This will culminate under Robert Mueller, the former Assistant Secretary General, who created what's known as the World Core Curriculum, which is being implemented in every school system around the world.
9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare,
with the sole aim of making the Americans lean towards international cooperation, primarily to the United Nations as the world's referee or peacekeepers, but
peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.
Part of the plan requires the gradual surrender of the United States, piece by piece and bit by bit, step by step. But to whom? We mentioned that it was Cecil Rhodes who, using his diamond and gold fortune and his 7 wills to establish a secret society, in his confession of faith he notes, The idea of gleaming and dancing before one's eyes, like the will of a wisp, at last forms itself into a plan. Why should we not form a secret society, but with one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and the bringing of the whole uncivilized world under British rule, for the recovery of the United States, and for making the Anglo-Saxon race but one empire? Previously, we mentioned Carroll Quigley, who, in his book Tragedy and Hope, details the life of Cecil Rhodes, who created a secret society to control the world using central banks. And on page 324, he notes why the use of a central bank. He says, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. He then details how this was to be accomplished. He continues and says, this system was to be controlled in feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived in frequent and private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the central banks, which themselves were private corporations. Each central bank in the hands of men like Sir Montague Norman of the Bank of England, Benjamin Strong in the New York Federal Reserve Bank, Charles Rist of the Bank of France, Jean Marchak of the Reichsbank. These sought to dominate the government by their ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence to the level of economic activity in any country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. Cecil Rhodes' secret society was formally established on February 5th, 1891. On page 132, Quigley says, in this secret society, Rhodes was to be the leader. Stead, Brett, Lord Esher, and Milner were to form an executive committee. Arthur, Lord Balfour, Sir Harry Johnston, Lord Rothschild, and Albert Lord Grey, and others were listed as members of a circle of initiates, while there was to be an outer circle known as the Association of Helpers, later organized by Milner into the Round Table organization. Thus, the central part of the secret society was established by March of 1891. Stay up to date with everything Iconic by following us on all of our social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like our videos. Due to monetization restrictions, you can support us by going to patreon.com/theiconicpodcast and make a monthly pledge. We are happy to announce the launch of the Iconic Label, where you can go to theiconiclabel.com and purchase an ever-expanding line of merchandise and gear. And now, without further ado, enjoy part 2 of Communist Subversion.